many people to be detained. Surely this government is aware of the intentions to build these isolation camps from coast to coast. And my question to the Premier is, how many of these camps will be built? And how many people does this government expect to detain?
My son is supposed to be coming in from the flight from Phoenix, and he is being detained because they didn't accept his test. They're saying it's not accurate, and they are wanting to take him to a quarantine facility. They won't let me talk to him. They won't let me see him. They won't come and talk to me. The board, they say he doesn't have a choice. They say that it's the law. They say that I don't have the right to talk to him, to see him. And they are taking him against my will and his will. And I'm not okay with it. And I don't know what to do about it. And I don't know where I'm supposed to find him. So this quarantine facility apparently is up and running and totally legal, as they say. And I'm freaking out.
Today, we're confirming an additional $23.7 million in federal funding to operate isolation sites in regions such as Toronto, Peel, York, and Durham. And we're finalizing the details for similar sites in Thunder Bay, Windsor, and other regions.
Quebec is planning to force adults that refuse a COVID vaccine to pay what's called a health contribution tax.
Those who refuse to receive their first dose in the coming weeks will have to pay a new health contribution.
We will be putting forward measures to put those tools permanently in place. The authorities of FinTrack, I believe, do need to be expanded to cover crowdsourcing platforms and payment platform and their payment providers.
Mais il y a aussi des gens qui sont farouchement opposés à la vaccination.
Qui sont extrémistes.
Qui croient pas dans la science, qui sont souvent misogynes, souvent racistes aussi. Et là, il faut faire un choix en tant que leader, en tant que pays. Est-ce qu'on tolère ces gens-là?
So we need to rethink our notion of what terrorism is these days. Is that the point?
Well, I think be more expansive in our definition. I really see two main streams, and one is an emphasis on nationalism, also tied in with a anti-statist or anti-authoritarian perceptions.
And why would we call it right-wing extremism?
You know, that traditional left-right ideological spectrum, liberalism, conservatism.
A new report that really is a warning about rising online activity by right-wing extremists in Canada.
In Canada, we found that right-wing extremists were more active in 2020 than they were in 2019. The accounts belonging to right-wing extremists were more prevalent and more accessible.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his government's COVID restrictions were a frequent target of those attacks.
Well, I absolutely do think that white supremacist movements are a very real, a very grave threat to Western liberal democracy. I think they are a grave and real threat here in Canada.
The next terrorist killer in Canada is known. We can build the profile. It's a guy. He's white. And he's probably said some shit. He's probably made you feel a little bit uncomfortable with some of his comments. He might have a thing for military paraphernalia or firearms. And we need to snitch on these guys.
You want my life, Jesse Brown? You come and take it. Don't send the millennials after me on your little witch hunt. Hey, what's up, troops? Sorry for the audio there when I was starting off. This is Jeff Eveley, Ops Sgt-Maj for Veterans for Freedom. I just thought I'd show the bulk of video I did a while back there called The Politics of Genocide. Go check it out on our Rumble channel if you haven't seen it in full. Yeah, I'm basically presenting just using the rhetoric and some of the legal actions being taken and whatnot. We can show that there are 9 out of 10 stages for genocide present in Canada right now. And I don't want to be alarmist. I just want to call out what I'm seeing here. And well, it's like I say, we're here to present a veteran view on things. And while I try to clean it up for my audience, most people would have a really hard time living in here. So I'm going to show you a couple things that are going on here that I guess are just kind of piquing my interest right now. Specifically, we have Lieutenant Steve Rogers. He's been addressing Canadians on his show, and he's quite a gem, actually. So it'll be nice to maybe get a look at him if you're not familiar with who he is. Also, there's a real pushback mounting on Twitter to Bill C-21. I don't want to go deep into the bill itself right now. I think most people are aware that this is the latest gun grab from the Liberals. And they snuck in an enormous amendment to the bill after it had already passed, I believe, the second reading of the House. So they tried to sneak this in there as an amendment and sees a long list of what any reasonable Canadian would have up until now considered to be hunting rifles. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit, but I'm not going to go do a real deep dive on the legislation for this one. I have some special guests lined up later in the week. I'm just kind of tightening everything up right now and crossing those I's and dotting those T's. And so I'm not going to give any spoilers, but I just want to save some material for later. So first up here, I thought I'd start with something kind of not quite directly related. Pardon me. But here's this CTV News poll that the machine is clearly putting out there right now that just kind of demoralizes. So I thought I would draw people's attention to this for just a quick second here because it's actually pretty funny. So this is a CTV News headline that says, most Canadians back invocation of the Emergencies Act during, quote, freedom convoy, close quote, protests, Nanos. And Nick Nanos, I've talked about it on other podcasts, but he runs this Nanos research think tank, and he's finally completely immolated, I think, whatever credibility he might have had left, and eliminated all doubt that he's anything but a for-profit pollster and a paid propagandist. So here we have Nick Nanos totally destroying whatever credibility he had left, and said, we've got support for the use of the Emergencies Act in response to the Freedom Convoy, and the green over here, 48% is support. This lighter shade of green is somewhat support. That's 18. So you're looking at, what's that, 66% overall, and the only ones, 66% overall that are in support of the invocation, and about 30% overall that are opposed to it. However, Nick Nanos isn't the only one completely destroying what might have been left for the credibility, because this was just from a few days ago, prior to them publishing the Nanos poll. And one other thing I want to point out here before I move on from the Nanos poll, but check this out. It says, more than 1,000 Canadians were asked about their thoughts on the Emergencies Act in a survey conducted by Nanos Research in the days after the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took the stand at the inquiry. Of the respondents, 48% said they support the use of the Emergencies Act, while 18% said they somewhat support the decision. Okay, so it's all about who supported it. And more than 1,000. So is that a big enough sample size to be able to provide a representative cross-section of Canadians, do you think? I'm thinking no. However, just a few days ago, this same state propaganda outlet, CTV News, had their own Twitter poll up here. And I remember seeing this on Twitter. They did a Twitter poll, and it says, it came back that, okay, so first of all, it says a quick poll. This is 25 November, so a little while ago, but it says, do you believe it was necessary to invoke the Emergencies Act in February? So they have 25% said yes and 75% no. So it's completely flipped. On the previous one, we saw that 2/3 were in favor, but now we're seeing not just 2/3 are opposed, but 3/4 are opposed. So it's completely flipped around. And I mean, quite frankly, who are you going to trust at this point? Is it going to be Nick Nanos, the Ottawa insider, and for-profit paid pollster, or what the CTV News got back on their Twitter poll. That's kind of the state of affairs right now with respect to institutional credibility at this point. So, I'll leave it to you guys to decide. Okay, so here's Steve Rogers. It says, important message to Canadians. We will not abandon you. Trudeau and his supporters are laughing stocks in the world. Okay, I'll let him speak for himself here. But
I come to you tonight to answer a number of messages that I have received from Canadian citizens all across your country. They're concerned about the recent developments in China and what impact it will have on our work with the Canadian people who are fighting to preserve freedom and liberty. But first, ladies and gentlemen, I'm compelled to respond to a statement by the Prime Minister of Canada regarding China. Now, I know full well that some of the Prime Minister's supporters, if not members of Parliament who support him, citizens who support him, watch our broadcast every Thursday night. So I'm going to ask you especially to listen to what I have to say with regard to what the Prime Minister had to say regarding the invasion, and that's what I call it, invasion of the Chinese military onto the streets of their citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to read the statement that your Prime Minister in Canada said in regard to that invasion, and I'm calling it an invasion because that's what it is. This is from Prime Minister Trudeau. Everyone in China should be allowed to protest. We will continue to ensure China knows we will stand for human rights and with people who are expressing themselves. My question to the Prime Minister is simply this. Explain to your people, explain to the people in my country, explain to people around the world why you unleashed excessive force on peaceful Canadian protesters. Your statement is hypocritical. Hypocritical to no end. I mean, to stand up before the world and to lead them to believe that you're supporting human rights, supporting individual rights, and you're against the tanks rolling into the cities and on the streets of the people who live in China. You seem to be okay with the fact that you unleashed your police, your federal police, local police, state police, whatever kind of law enforcement means you had, you unleashed them on peaceful protesters. That is a disgrace. And the people around the world are aware of that. They know that. But what's worse, Mr. Trudeau, if you yourself is watching, which I doubt you are, but I'm sure some of your supporters can bring this message to you. What's worse than making this statement is the fact that Canadian Parliament members who support him, the Prime Minister, are becoming the laughingstock of the world. And they're putting a stain upon themselves, a stain upon democracy, a stain upon their nation like at no other time in history. Because they know full well that Trudeau's a liar. They know that he basically is an individual only looking out for his survival as a political, and I won't even call him a leader, as a political advocate, if you will, before the world. But not all these people around the world are stupid. They're not dumb. They see with their eyes, they hear with their ears, and they know exactly where the Prime Minister is coming from. But here's something else more astonishing, more startling. In fact, so startling that I'm still waiting to hear members of the Canadian Parliament by the hundreds shouting out to the Prime Minister that he should resign. Because after we learned that there is a reported conversation between Trudeau and a number of people, I believe it could have been in a caucus, a conversation about putting tanks in the streets of Canada during the protest. Now, can you explain that, Mr. Prime Minister? Can you explain to the people in the United States of America who absolutely, I could tell you, who absolutely are shocked over a statement from a person who's supposed to be leading a free country, from a person who's supposed to be supporting freedom and liberty, to even have a discussion, a suggestion, an idea to put military tanks in the streets of their country against their own people? That is exactly the playbook that we've been talking about for a long time regarding the Canadian Parliament members who support a friend of President Xi, meaning Prime Minister Trudeau. That is out of the Communist Chinese Party's playbook. If the police can't handle it, get the troops out. I would hope and pray that that day never comes. And if that day ever comes where he issues such an order, or even an individual like Joe Biden tries to issue such an order, that the United States military here in America and the Canadian military will not obey those orders. They in this country are unlawful. I don't know if such orders in Canada would be unlawful, but I would hope to God that the military in both our country would understand that you don't turn the military of the people against the people. But you see,
Okay, so yeah, that's about the bottom line here. I should have read the title on this one. It says, U.S. military Lieutenant Steve Rogers issues important message to Canadians. We will not abandon you. And Trudeau and his supporters are laughing stocks of the world. Yeah, you know, Lieutenant Rogers is another military guy, so he's really quick to point out these ties and you know, with the CCP and. We know, you know, there's a report out there somewhere. We're not allowed to know who the CCP-funded MPs are at this moment. I can hazard a guess as to which party they're in. Yeah, we got a real problem on our hands here, Canada. We really need to take a closer look at this and find out exactly what's going on. Because all the kind of harbingers and all the warning signs are there, you know. So that's kind of what I'm saying here. I want to take care not to hype things up. It's a pretty sensitive topic, obviously, but it's my show, so if you're tuning in here, then it's what you're expecting. So the other thing that I want to talk about here was the Carey Price. That was the I Stand With Carey, hashtag I Stand With Carey. Did I misspell that in the title? I think I did. I left the E out. I thought I copied that from Twitter. It says, the title of the article is CTV News again. It says, I am not a criminal. Habs goalie Carey Price speaks against controversial firearms bill. I'm going to play the video here. It's about 3 minutes long, so not too bad. This is how the machine is presenting this issue right now. If you're not aware, so we had the Habs goalie there, Carey Price, come out and he started a campaign on social media, and he showed himself with his firearm and basically took a stand here and said he's sick and tired of being vilified by the state. He's a perfectly law-abiding and peaceful, productive citizen. So I think a lot of people are starting to feel this too. It was pretty overwhelming on Twitter. So let's see what they got to say here first.
Canadians goalie Carey Price is known to be a man of very few words, but he made a statement over the weekend, and those words he spoke are now making headlines right across the country. Price has stepped out of hockey and taken a position against the Trudeau government's latest gun control bill, and he's publicly supporting a controversial gun lobby organization.
So when they say controversial, they just mean they don't like it.
Fanjihu has the story.
The Instagram post shows Carey Price during hunting season criticizing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau over the gun control bill C-21. Price also expresses support for the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights, a lobby group which last week sold merchandise using Poly as a promo code. And that angered the group, which includes Polytechnic survivors, that has been fighting for tougher gun control.
His comment just add confusion to a very complex debate. So I'm very sad that he did it, because he's a real Canadian symbol and people love him and believe in this guy.
Price's comments come close to the 33rd anniversary of the Polytechnic massacre, where 14 women were murdered. An executive from Groupe CH, which owns the Montreal Canadiens, told Radio-Canada that Price, who played with Montreal for 15 years, was not aware of the Polytechnic tragedy that is remembered every December since 1989. But his public stand on the issue is also shedding light on increasing divisions around Bill C-21. The Liberal government's proposed amendments are perceived to be penalizing hunters while ignoring handgun violence in major cities.
So I
Okay. Yeah, just a couple of quick comments there. The framing is kind of what you've got to watch for here. Okay. I mean, they could just show you what the guy said. I don't even think they read the post itself, and they jump right to Lake Cole Polytechnique. So, yeah, if you're a hunter, if you're a firearms owner, if you support firearms rights, if you see it as a property rights issue, any of the above, then you want women to die, right? This is the kind of emotional manipulation that they've been at for years and years and years and years. And that's really kind of what you got to watch for. I'm not seeing like the data points of this story here anywhere. They're really just kind of laying it on pretty thick with the invocation of the emotions, with the emotional rhetoric, and bringing on survivors of violent attacks to kind of really pile on to somebody who wasn't talking about that at all. And I think the way they're trying to spin it here is that he's just not aware of what they're trying to do with this. They're trying to prevent women from dying, and this ignoramus doesn't know any better, something like that. But I want to show this guy too. Hang on.
I think they've laid themselves open to the gun lobby saying, you're just going after us, and you're not doing the things that will actually save lives. And they are correct.
In Quebec, the Federation.
Okay, so there's kind of the same thing that I was talking about there, the framing, the way they set this up, and this is this guy is clumsy enough to sort of really lay bare what just how bad it is. So one second, I'm going to show him one more time because I think he's funny.
So I think they've laid themselves open to the gun lobby saying, you're just going after us.
So the Liberals are making the mistake of just leaving themselves open to these kinds of, because like this is the kind of thing that you normally say and then follow up with leave themselves open to like baseless attacks and stuff like this. But anyway.
And you're not doing the things that will actually save lives. And
so they're leaving themselves open to those kinds of attacks. That's what he's saying.
They are correct.
Yeah, it's true. It's not just an attack. It's not baseless. It's a valid criticism.
Quebec, the Federation of Hunters and Anglers say the backlash is due in part because hunters across Canada did not expect new restrictions that would outlaw hundreds of hunting rifles models based on conflicting definition of what constitutes an assault rifle.
À la base, C-21 avait été
C-21 was supposed to address public security issues, she says. Then all of a sudden, they throw in amendments that target certain hunting rifles, she says. For many hunters, Price included, and despite confirmation from Ottawa that his rifle is legal, it proved to be the tipping point in a highly emotional debate. Stéphane Giroux, CTV News.
How is this new legislation being received?
Let's see. Okay, so there you have it. That's how they're presenting it over there at CTV, and the kind of tack that the machine is taking. This is a little screen cap here of an article by Brian Lilly, and I assume this is the Sun. It says Post Media. Yeah, Toronto Sun is barely visible up there. So the title is What a Save. Carey Price's recent criticism of the Liberals' gun control bill has coincided with, quote, a lot of feedback from the public. So that's a good sign. I think this really took off on social media there. I was pretty astonished at just how many people were out there posting pictures of themselves with their firearms and continuing that meme that Carey started. They followed sort of the same wording and whatnot from his original tweet. It was it really took off. So Twitter's getting better, guys. I see a lot of room for optimism here. So I'll just read a couple of pairs from this. We're used to carry price saving pucks, not guns. On Monday, the Habs goalie may have done the latter after Prime Minister Justin Trudeau changed his tune on banning hunting rifles and shotguns. It's not that Trudeau is abandoning his plan, but after Price's intervention, he said he's listening to feedback from hunters. The Trudeau government is trying to pass Bill C-21, a proposed law that they say they sold to the public as dealing with a handgun freeze and banning what they call, quote, military-style assault weapons, close quote, 2 weeks ago, though the Liberals moved an amendment to their bill that would add hundreds of models of guns to the banned list, many of them hunting rifles and shotguns. Okay, yeah, what a save by Kerry. We really got everybody motivated there. And apparently Trudeau is kind of backing down. I just wanted to show a clip of what he's saying exactly. And like, honestly, you can never believe anything this guy says, right, guys? So I think it's just political gamesmanship, okay, at bottom. Is it a head fake? Are they really going to go for they're going to come back harder after the guns next time? Is it something to distract away from what's happening with the Emergency Measures Act inquiry? They sure don't want us talking about that and what's coming out on there. There are some really good tweets. Some of the lawyers are staying active and stuff like that. So could be, but whatever it is, we know Trudeau's not being sincere. So here he goes.
In this country to keep communities safe, to keep Canadians safe. And we're going to continue to do that. We move forward with a national freeze on handguns. And a few years ago, we banned military-style assault weapons. Banned assault-style weapons.
So you see what changed, right? It was military-style assault weapons, and now it's assault-style weapons. So I'll talk a little bit more about the terminology. Obviously, these are not real words that he's using. This is Trudeau that we're talking about. This is a bunch of made-up garblegook. But I couldn't help but notice that switch, that he went from military, he dropped the military, right? And now it's just whatever the hell the garblegook is right now, assault-style weapons. And that's not the proper term either. Like a weapon is something that you use against another person. These are firearms, they're tools. You wouldn't hear, I don't know, anybody at the range really calling these things weapons. I don't think. They're always firearms, rifles, handguns, maybe guns, that kind of thing. But weapon is not the right term here.
We're going to continue to do that. Now, we've just put forward a list, and we're consulting with Canadians on that. We're hearing a lot of feedback around concerns that hunters are saying about guns that they use more for hunting or hunting rifles or shotguns. And that's what we're listening to feedback on now to make sure that we're not capturing weapons that are primarily hunting weapons.
Not hunting weapons. They're firearms.
But we all know that we need to make sure that guns that are designed to kill the largest number of people as quickly as possible have no place in Canada. And we're going to continue.
I'm going to get into the terms a little bit here, guys, but this is a non sequitur here, okay? Because he's saying, okay, first of all, I agree. So the kinds of firearms, weapons that are designed to kill the greatest number of people in the shortest period of time are called automatic weapons, right? So, and that's what an assault rifle is one that has a select fire capability and usually has some form of full auto or burst fire available. Those are the ones that you just squeeze the trigger and it continues to fire. It's spray and pray, right? You can just spray bullets. You can't do that with any of the stuff that we're talking about here. You can't do that with any of the firearms that are listed in this legislation. It's a bit of, it's just false. They're not talking about the kinds of firearms, which are weapons, which are called assault rifles, that have a full auto capability. So yeah, he's lying.
Continue to move forward with that in a strong and smart way. We'll continue to listen to Canadians. We're not going after hunting rifles or shotguns. We are targeting the most dangerous weapons, the weapons that were used in places like École Polytechnique or recently in South Simcoe or in Portapique that have caused far too much tragedy over the past many, many years. So we're moving forward in a responsive way. Some conservative politicians at the federal level want to restore.
And note how he added at the federal level. He's not talking about his buddy Doug over here.
Military-style assault weapons. We're not going to let them do that. We're going to continue to keep communities safe in a smart way that respects.
It sounded like he threw the military back in there again, so he needs more coaching.
Law-abiding gun owners.
Okay, now, let me see now. I thought that there was something on the beginning of that clip that maybe I didn't catch it the first time around here, but yeah. Okay, so I just want to back it up to the guy's question here because I also thought that this was kind of interesting. We're not really missing much with the question here. It's hard to hear. Check this out.
Last-minute amendments brought to committee at C-21 raised a lot of criticism. Would you consider bringing in some changes to the prohibited list of weapons?
Look at Dougie's reaction. What's going on with that? Why? I thought he was a conservative, right? Why is he shaking his head at that question? So the question was, there's been a lot of criticism of the bill. Would you consider, making some adjustments to the prohibited list, or was something to that effect, the list of prohibited weapons? So it seems to me to be a pretty straightforward, hey, people are upset about this. Are you willing to listen? And then we got Dougie in the back here. Look at him.
A lot of criticism. Would you consider bringing in some changes to the prohibited list of weapons?
Let's be very clear.
He's shaking his head. He's all exasperated about this. So I thought that was interesting, and I just wanted to point it out. So here's a little bit of the terminology that I just mentioned here. Ed just mentioned, and this is Wikipedia, and of course, they're left wing. So I can use them as a source to make my point because they're going to couch everything in a way that is, amenable to progressives because that's who they are. So it says an assault rifle is a select fire rifle that uses an intermediate cartridge in a detachable magazine. Assault rifles were first put into mass production and accepted into widespread service during World War II. The first assault rifle to see major usage was the German STG-44, a development of the earlier MKB-42. While immediately after World War II, NATO countries were equipped with battle rifles. The development of the M16 rifle during the Vietnam War prompted an adoption of assault rifles by the rest of NATO. By the end of the 20th century, assault rifles had become the standard weapon in most of the world's armies, replacing full-powered rifles and submachine guns in most roles. The two most successful modern rifles are the AK-47 and the M16 design and their derivatives. So that's kind of what I wanted to show you here, but it's this select fire, okay? So I'm just going, I'm going to hover over this term. It says select fire is the capability of a weapon to be adjusted from the fire in semi-automatic, fully automatic, and or burst mode. The modes are chosen by means of a selector switch, which varies depending on the weapon's design. Some select fire weapons have the burst fire mechanisms to limit the maximum number, and it goes on. But the burst fire is basically like M16. I think it's 5 rounds that it fires. You squeeze, it'll go 5, and then you've got to squeeze again. Or is it 3-round burst? Anyway, I've never fired an M16. I've only ever fired the C7 and C8. Maybe. Anyway, I carried one around with me, but I don't think I ever fired it. So the assault rifle, what makes it an assault rifle, what makes it the kind of the standard weapon of choice for militaries around the world is that select fire capability. It's the ability to squeeze the trigger and spray bullets, okay? But none of the stuff that they're talking about has that capability. Now, assault weapon, same progressive source I'm showing here. So an assault weapon in the United States, assault weapon is a controversial term used to define firearms with specified characteristics. The definition varies among regulating jurisdictions, but usually includes semi-automatic firearms with a detachable magazine, a pistol grip, and sometimes other features such as a vertical forward grip, flash suppressor, or barrel shroud. None of those things make a firearm any more deadly. Certain firearms are specified by name in some laws that restrict assault weapons. When the now defunct federal assault weapons ban was passed in 1994, the U.S. Department of Justice said, quote, in general, assault weapons are semi-automatic firearms with large magazines of ammunition that were designed and configured for rapid fire and combat use, close quote. The commonly used definition of assault weapons are under frequent debate and have changed over time. So it's a political term. That's what it is. It's just something that politicians make up so they can go after people's property and scapegoat people who will never vote for them for their failures to implement some kind of comprehensive violent crime legislation or mount any kind of a response to the rise in violent crime that we've seen in Canada here since 2015. So yeah, assault weapon is a totally malleable term that's just a made-up nothing burger that politicians throw around whenever they want to stoke division and fear, so they can go after people that don't vote for them. So the one that Trudeau mentioned was the Ruger Mini 14. Was it a Mini in Lake-Hall Polytechnique? I'm not quite sure, but anyway, this is the semi-automatic that he's talking about. It's been around since 1973, as you can see right here. It's based on the M14 rifle, and it's essentially a scaled-down, chambered 5.56 millimeter NATO. So that's another thing people like. A lot of people would see that and they say, okay, it takes a NATO round, so that makes it military, that makes it scary, but it's just a measuring standard essentially, and there's it's effectively a 22 round. Okay, it's a center fire 22. It's got a little bit of a longer chamber so that it produces a little bit more power, and a little bit better range, but the projectile is the same. You can take basically you can take a rifle that's chambered for the 5.56 and you can put a 223 round in it and it'll work, but you can't go the other way around because the 223, like the chamber is not long enough to hold the 5.56. But there's very little difference in the projectiles themselves. When I go ahead and click on that, check this out. So there's your 5.56 NATO. And do they have a 223 here to compare it to? 5.66 NATO and the 5.56. Let's say that's it. They're very close. They're very similar is the point. So they're basically talking about 22s, which, while in the event of like total civilizational collapse, it might be better to have it and not need it than need it not have it. But the only thing it's really good for maybe is, shooting coyotes. And humans are animals, so I guess that would work too, obviously, because it's a NATO round. But that doesn't mean that anybody has nefarious intentions with these things. Okay. These are a very small round. If you really wanted to do some damage, you'd probably maybe get something 7.62. Okay, these are kind of old standard NATO and current standard for old Warsaw Pact, I guess, or the East. So that's a much bigger round right there, and it's a little bit more like a 30-06. So you can buy a 30-06. Whatever you're going to do, you can get all kinds of different ammo that's much bigger, has a much longer range. And all kinds of stuff. This is not basically they're just they're hyping this whole thing, right? There's nothing special about any of these firearms or the ammunition that makes them any more deadly to humans than your average 30-06. So maybe not average. You'd probably if there's a magazine, that's something to think about when you're talking about maybe situations involving mass chaos and stuff like that, I suppose. But otherwise, from what I've seen, changing magazines, it doesn't really matter in these situations. I've seen some other people speak on this that are much smarter on it than me. I'm actually trying to show somebody who's smarter than me on this issue right now. Her name is Tracy Wilson, and she's not the person I've seen speak on this, but witnesses to mass shootings, I've seen some of that where they say that it just takes like a second, right? 2 seconds. It really does to do like a mag change. And, you know, the guy is going to practice before he shows up there. And the thing about a mass shooter situation, which we call an active shooter situation, is that everybody is running for cover. That's what you do in an active shooter situation is you run away and you try to take cover. So he's got plenty of time to change those mags because he's the only one who's armed, right? And everybody's running away from him. So I've always found that to be a very specious argument. The high capacity magazine is really more for situation, like it might be helpful for a situation like, you know, the LA riots where we saw, you know, Korean shop owners defending their property. I believe it was using AR-15s, and I believe it was an AR-15 that Kyle Rittenhouse used to defend himself from an attempted murder at the Kenosha riots. And of course he was charged, and the media tried to make a big deal out of that and say he was a mass shooter, and I've even heard him called a serial killer, but he's been exonerated. And those of us who were tracking it at the time saw all of the video evidence real time that it was a clean shoot, very clear cut case of you know, self-defense. And you know, go watch it for yourself. But anyway, so this is Tracy Wilson, and she's the she's staff at CCFR, CCDAF, mother, nan, military wife, daughter of Tweets Are My Own. And so yeah, she's been sharing some pretty good stuff here. And it really is kind of, okay, here's one. It says, legal gun owners tend to be more effective in killing people because they spend time at target practice or hunting. And this is Wendy Kakir, source Toronto Star. So this, and it says right here, dehumanizing gun owners won't end violence. And that's right. That's all they're doing is making, you know, I guess these snowflake city folk absolutely terrified of just regular everyday Canadians. So I wanted to, yeah, go check her out because she's been pretty active with this. And I saw her give a little press conference here. Not sure if this made it into the regular rotation out there on the Twitterverse or the mainstream media for that matter. But I just thought I'd show you a couple of minutes of what she's had to say in response to this latest attempt to backdoor a gun grab.
Good morning. Over the last 7 years, crime and violence has skyrocketed under the Liberal NDP government, all while the Liberals increased gun control on unlicensed gun owners. And while they were at it, made life the easiest it's ever been on criminals. The Liberals have rolled out 3 gun bans in 3 years, while gang-related homicide has shot up 92%, basically doubled, along with a 32% rise in violent crime, all since the Liberals took office. Those same gun-owning Canadians need to ask what in the world is going on. The Liberals spent the first 3 years of their majority government pontificating about how government has no business classifying firearms and that it should be left to the experts at the RCMP lab. Then they engaged in precisely that behavior at a level we've never seen before in the history of our country, and take a good hard look at the mess that they've created. On top of that, they've yet again circumvented democracy and the usual parliamentary process by sneaking in Amendment G4 into C21, this late in the committee stage. After 2 votes in the House of Commons, after deliberation at SECU, after all the expert witnesses testified, excuse me, and after hearing from Indigenous leaders, nobody got to speak to this sweeping hunting gun ban amendment. This is a mockery of our legislative system and does nothing for public safety. Canada is a far more dangerous place to live, and we are more divided than ever. The Liberals and their enablers, the NDP, and of course the Bloc, can credit themselves for this massive failure at keeping Canadians safe. And I will mention, not only making Canadians far less safe than ever in a modern Canada and wasting billions in tax resources, this coalition feels it virtuous to lay this disaster at the feet of licensed gun owners who are productive, law-abiding contributors to Canadian society since long before Confederation. So I would ask, what exactly have we done to deserve this? And how is this going to make Canada better? I'd ask all Canadians to dedicate a few minutes today to think about this.
So there you have it. And I got a good comment here from Aaron Chowdhury. And this is the thing, guys. I didn't really want to do the deep dive on the technicalities of the bill or the firearms today, because I have some, I hopefully have some guests coming on later this week that are going to put me to shame anyway. I'm not the most knowledgeable person on firearms. You know, I'm a military guy and everything like that, but there are far more enthusiastic people out there than me. I appreciate the top cover. It says the M14 that Le Pen used at Polytechnique was a straight pull bolt action that he, I'm going to say, upgraded to make it a full auto. So yeah, you know what? I don't think I am aware of that. Did he? How can he do that? How can he make it a full auto? But anyway, so he probably did modify it or whatever. And was it sawed off? Maybe I can't recall. But regardless, like, it's just a good rifle. That's all. And yeah, like, certain police agencies will use it, and maybe certain militaries. I'm not sure about that, because militaries are going to look for the full auto capability, and the Ruger doesn't have that. So yeah, that's kind of the bottom line there. You know, anybody can use a firearm to hurt people the way that anybody can use a car to hurt people. And if you really want to take out a lot of people in a very short amount of time, that's all you really got to do is get behind the wheel of a car or a truck. And that's actually that's a modus operandi of the of ISIS. That was something they've been doing for years, is calling for vehicle attacks. Just like Globalist News, who's calling for those vehicle attacks well, you know, not literally calling for the vehicle attacks, but they definitely incited enough hatred as to so that you know, some deranged individual showed up and went after those freedom-loving patriots because he thought that they were white supremacists. So, but I did another podcast on that. Globalist News is just ISIS, so maybe check that out if you want to hear more on it. So that was Tracy, and now we have Toronto Police. This is a Project Barbell News Conference, and this is from yesterday, December 5th. And I thought this was quite interesting, and it really kind of it really kind of flies in the face of everything the government is saying right now. So I'll go ahead and let this gentleman speak for himself here.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. I'm here with Superintendent Steve Watts of Organized Crime Enforcement to share the results of Project Barbell, a firearm trafficking investigation that has resulted in multiple arrests and, as you can see, the seizure of dozens of illegal firearms. In front of you today are 62 firearms, including 5 AR-15 semi-automatic rifles. 260 charges have been laid against 6 individuals, one of whom has now been identified as a suspect in a reckless shooting that occurred in a crowded bar in October of 2021. While we are here to show the public the results of a successful investigation, this is not a good news story. While it represents outstanding police work, we should all be disturbed by a gun seizure of this magnitude. Gun violence continues to be the most significant public safety concern for the people of Toronto. Why? Because our youth are dying over this issue. Shootings devastate families and erode the sense of security for entire communities. And every one of these guns was destined for our streets and our communities. StatsCan recently reported that the national homicide rate increased by a 3rd straight year. Noteworthy is that nearly a quarter of the killings in 2021 were linked to gangs and organized crime. Community safety is a shared responsibility, and the root causes of gun and gang violence are complex and extend far beyond the scope of policing. We remain fully committed to working with our partner agencies and all levels of government on prevention and addressing root causes for those who are at risk. But let me be clear, we are equally committed to targeting those who are high risk, those who choose to carry and to use illegal guns in our neighborhoods. In addition to our commitments to prevention and enforcement, we have also advocated through our board for bail reform and other legislative changes to better tackle gun violence in our city. These include ensuring that bail hearings for the most serious firearm offenses are heard by a judge of the Ontario Court or Superior Court to hold the most high-risk offenders more accountable for their dangerous actions. Amending the criminal code so that someone who intentionally uses a gun in a public setting surrounded by innocent people, like a park or a nightclub, is prosecuted to the full extent of the law, including a charge of first-degree murder if someone is killed in these circumstances. In other words, firing a handgun in a congregate setting. Or at least alternatively, consider increasing bail opportunities to be somehow mirror first-degree murder. And finally, a commitment to ongoing funding at our border crossings. We've indeed received millions of dollars in federal funding that's allowing CBSA to have more boots on the ground and to help all levels of firearm investigation, a lot of firearm investigation to continue to deal with smuggling and trafficking, which is the essence of where all these firearms have come from. But there's more investment that needs to be made. So again, I want to thank our officers, particularly those in our integrated gang and gun task.
Okay, so there you have it. You know, he's not talking about confiscation of legally acquired firearms held by responsible firearms owners. He's talking about a smuggling ring that has been able to flourish because of lax bail practices and I'm going to say probably lax immigration practices. I can't imagine the CBSA is being allowed to deport too many people these days. I would expect that the same kind of interference that we saw into the RCMP and is pervasive everywhere. I mean, we saw it with the military too, where they're forcing this wokeness on them. Yeah, so they've been reaching down into inappropriate levels of government and the state for a long time. The Mark Norman affair was a pretty good example of just how awry things have really gone. They're all ambling for favor with the dear leader, and nobody's really following the rules. So it's pretty dangerous territory to be in. So this is an article here. It says an elegant letter to the editor, background checks, no problem. Gun control followed by genocides. So which publication is this? So I'm showing a version of it here that I use. It's like a reader's version because this is one of these paid publications where I need to buy a prescription. So if I just switch to this view, then you don't get all the imagery and stuff like that, but it keeps the Java from stopping me from viewing the text. So anyway, this is an article I found from 2013, I believe. Yeah, 2013. So it says, editor's note, we have determined the portions of this letter are plagiarized from two separate sources, a YouTube video entitled, quote, 56 million people exterminated from gun control in the 20th century, close quote, and a blog item at newswithviews.com, Lynn Sutter, titled, quote, of despots and sheeple, close quote. We have included these links to the original publications and have notified the letter writer that his work will be carefully scrutinized before any future publication in the Daily Herald, that's who it is, it's the Daily Herald, and banned if another instance of plagiarism is found. Okay, so this is a plagiarized article, yes, but there's a couple of good titles for you to go check out there on these YouTube videos. So it says background checks, no problem. Gun registration is a big problem. Every genocide in modern history started with a gun registration, followed by confiscation, followed by genocide. In 1929, the Soviet Union established gun control. From 1929 to 1953, 20 million dissidents rounded up and murdered. 1911, Turkey established gun control. From 1915 to 1917, 1.5 million Christian Armenians were rounded up and exterminated. 1938, Germany established gun control. From 1939 to 1945, 13 million Jews and others rounded up and exterminated. 1935, China established gun control. From 1948 to 1952, 20 million political dissidents rounded up and exterminated. 1964, Guatemala established gun control. From 1981 to 1984, 100,000 Mayan Indians rounded up and exterminated. 1970, Uganda established gun control. From 1971 to 1979, 300,000 Christians rounded up and exterminated. 1956, Cambodia established gun control. From 1975 to 1977, 1 million educated people rounded up and exterminated. In the 20th century, more than 56 million defenseless people were rounded up and exterminated by people using gun control. The previous information is taken nearly word for word with some minor omissions and revisions from the YouTube URL. There's the URL. The right to keep and bear arms is not about anyone's, quote, hunting rifle, close quote. The right to keep and bear arms is about the right of people to defend themselves against anyone who would attempt the taking of their rights. 236 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, our founding fathers are still more intelligent and have more common sense than the anti-gun crowd. But they knew, having suffered the tyranny of King George, that the right to keep and bear arms was imperative to the God-given right of every man, woman, and child to be free of evil tyrants who walk among us. That's pretty well said there. The evil tyrants who walk among us. I like that. The previous three paragraphs are taken verbatim from Lynn Sutter at this source here. So anyway, yeah, notwithstanding the plagiarism, the article stands. Like the content of the article is accurate. It's just that the crafter of this article failed to identify his sources, and I'm just going to show you what this looks like. So. Yeah, so this is the original article here, and that's what happens when you try to go there. They want a subscription, okay. And this was a pretty good. This is Carl Stack, so Substack here, Chris Burnett, yeah, this is a pretty good article. It's a little bit lengthy, so I might just kind of skip over a couple of spots to power through this thing. But it says a legislative onslaught against freedom. Although most of Carl Stack's readers are American, a healthy percentage are Canadian, and so am I. Therefore, I feel a duty to report on the downfall of the country that I once loved. If you don't care about Canadian politics, then at least use us as a cautionary tale. Learn from our mistakes so that you may be free. Justin Trudeau's government is currently in the middle of granting itself sweeping new powers that will be used to seize control of the internet, seize control of the media, crush dissent, and control the population. Of the 6 bills passed, which they will, Canadians will regret it for the rest of their short, miserable, emasculated lives. Okay, Bill C-11, the Online Streaming Act. The government says that we need to pass Bill C-11 because the last reform of the Broadcasting Act was in 1991, before online streaming services existed. They need modern powers to control the YouTube, TikTok, Facebook algorithms. Ostensibly, this is to prioritize, quote, Canadian content, close quote. The government wants to spoon-feed you only wholesome Canadian content, just like the magnanimous government of North Korea only wants to spoon-feed wholesome North Korean content. I wholeheartedly endorse that comparison. YouTube itself warns that the BC-11 is, quote, put into practice. This means that when viewers come to the YouTube homepage, they're served content that a Canadian government regulator has prioritized rather than the content they are interested in, close quote. And there's a good link to a video of somebody giving testimony there in that regard. The government will tweak the algorithms to deprioritize un-Canadian content, brackets, anything that it doesn't approve of, close brackets, while prioritizing Canadian content like, quote, Canada's Drag Race, close quote, which Trudeau appeared on as a guest last week. So Canadian. Wow. So, yeah. While, quote, Canada's Drag Race, close quote, is an example of Canadian content that would be prioritized by this bill, the Catholic Civil Rights League is concerned that Bill C-11 will deprioritize the free speech of Catholics. Quote, in a free and democratic society, efforts to limit free speech must be opposed in favor of open communication, which includes opinions that government might view as dissentient. I think it's dissident. We support the dignity of the human person from conception until natural death. In our opposition to abortion and euthanasia, we hope that broadcasters will allow such voices to be heard in a robust way rather than submit to government diktat. And that gets to the root of the problem. The definition of, quote, Canadian content, close quote, is so purposely broad that it's guaranteed it will be abused by bureaucrats and the Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission, the CRTC, who are supposed to be impartial, but in reality, everyone knows they obsequiously and gleefully take their marching orders straight from the Liberals. I'm just going to throw in a point here. I'm going to put my techie hat on for a second. So these are the Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission. Now, is Ethernet really telecommunications? I'm not so sure. I kind of think it's its own medium, and the CRTC was created as essentially a frequency manager. Okay, if you're broadcasting, radio frequency, and you have multiple radio stations in an area, and they're all broadcasting on the same frequency, well, they're all going to interfere with each other. So we do need a regulator to make sure that there are penalties imposed on people who like jam licensed frequencies that are being used by Canadian broadcasters. So that makes sense, okay, because that needs to be managed. Also the television and telecommunications. Okay, so the television, this is clearly not television. And the thing about television is, again, there's a medium that's required there, and that started out as a radio medium and later became a cable medium. And then we've got the telecommunications, and to me, like a telecommunications system, once you start getting into IP and into Ethernet, I'm sorry, guys, we can kind of develop technologies that emulate telecommunications over Ethernet. It's VoIP, but they're different technologies. The conventional telecommunication system is like a minus 49 volt analog system. It's a 2-wire system. Ethernet is 2-wire, but anyway, these are completely different animals altogether. None of these things are the same kinds of technologies, and they're just sort of putting the internet in there with the same with these same old resource constrained technologies, and there's just no need for it because everything is kind of wide open with Ethernet. There's really no need for anybody to tell me when I can and can't access it because I might be interfering with somebody else. It just doesn't work that way. The network takes care of all that stuff for us. So you can get on and off there as much as you want. So back to the article. The CRTC cannot and will not defy orders from the federal government. The CRTC will be granting sweeping new powers to censor whatever they want, and there are no guardrails. The Trudeau government is simply promising, fingers crossed, that bureaucrats won't use the full power handed to them. Do you trust them? Of course we don't. We just saw that the bureaucrats declared war on peaceful Canadians at the Trucker Commission. They just kind of do whatever the heck they want and don't respect the highest land of the law. So why would we trust them after that? So there we go. That's an article there on the CRTC confirms Internet Bill C-11 will regulate user content. Okay, so Bill C-18, the Online News Act. As per the text of the bill, quote, the purpose of the Online News Act is to regulate digital news intermediaries with a view to enhancing fairness in the Canadian digital news marketplace and contributing to its sustainability, including the sustainability of independent local news businesses. Now, just in case you guys didn't catch it, I think that was today that Blacklock's reporter was escorted out of the parliamentary news gallery. I think Ezra even said that it was at gunpoint. I think that was more, I don't think somebody was pointing a gun at them. I think it was somebody probably had a gun on them. The security probably carry guns. And really that's more about the interaction that we all face when we're dealing with an asset of the state like that. If we successfully resist their every attempt to impose the state's will on us, then that interaction ends with a bullet in your brain. That's just how it works. And that's through a gradual escalation, of course, after a gradual escalation as it should work. But I think that was just kind of rhetoric. Ultimately, not that somebody was pointing a gun. What does that mean in practice? Just like the results of BC11 is sweeping new powers for the CRTC to control the internet, the result of Bill C-18 is sweeping new powers for the CRTC to control the media. For starters, this bill would make CRTC responsible for determining who is a journalist. Quote, the act will include criteria to determine which news businesses are eligible, close quote. This will be abused to gatekeep the little guy. Liberal member of Parliament Lisa Hefner, who spent her career as a, quote, journalist, close quote, made it clear last week that she doesn't consider, quote, a couple of hundred online news organizations, close quote, as, quote, news, close quote, since they, quote, publish opinions, close quote, as if CBC reporters don't heavily inject their opinions into everything they write. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we need to beat that drum too hard. Everybody here should understand that the CBC is just a state propaganda outlet, totally in the pocket of the Liberals, and vice versa. They're basically just all kind of the same people, right? And they're all in it together, and it's essentially a mindless mob. Okay, but they're ideological bedfellows. They're all kind of motivated by the same ideology. That's why they make such good bedfellows, and I would say kind of mindless collaborators. So it says, which gets to the thrust of the bill. It's a handout to the oligopoly that already controls Canadian media. You just need to ask yourself who is lobbying hardest for this bill and ask why they are lobbying so hard. The top 5 media organizations in Canada, Bell, TELUS, Rogers, Shaw, and Quebecor, account for 73% of all media revenue in Canada. The mechanism to accomplish this will be, quote, payment for links, close quote. Every time a story is linked to Facebook or Google, Bill C-18 would force Facebook to pay the, quote, approved, close quote, journalist for the link. I think they were calling that the link tax for shorthand. This payment for link is based on a model from Australia called the, quote, News Media Bargaining Code, close quote, where it's estimated about 90% of the revenues of the new law have gone to Australia's 3 largest media companies. This is exactly what a parliamentary budget officer estimates will happen in Canada. The bill will generate $329 million per year for Canadian news organizations, but the vast majority will go to CBC, Bell, and Rogers. Independent journalists, if they somehow magically succeed in their fight to be classified as, quote, journalists, will be left fighting for the scraps. Yeah, so, like, I mean, this is all about setting up all the wrong kinds of incentive structures. And this is very much akin to a lot of the stuff that I'm always talking about, where the corporations, the investment class, the boomer generation, since they're the ones that are controlling these things at this particular moment in our history, they're squeezing all the little guys, all the younger generations to soak up all the wealth into their generation. And that's what we witnessed over the course of COVID, was the single greatest intergenerational theft of wealth that we've ever seen in the history of the species. So this business model is fundamentally backward. The premise of C-18 is that online platforms such as Facebook are, quote, stealing, close quote, news content by making links to the news material available to their sites. But if anything, social media is a boon for journalist articles to go viral. If you put a tax on viral articles, Bill C-18 creates a disincentive for platforms to link to news material. Less articles will go viral, and less readers will click the story. I think there should be fewer readers. The more appropriate way to think of a story going viral on Facebook isn't, quote, hey, let's tax it, close quote. It's, quote, hey, thanks for the free marketing, close quote. Facebook sent registered publishers in Canada more than 1.9 billion clicks last year, and an estimated market value of more than 230 million. That shows you just how flawed all of this is. It's completely upside down. It's completely backward. Facebook doesn't owe them anything. They're providing them with an incredible free service that gives them way more reach, gets them way more views, brings in way more ad revenue because of their free services. So anyway, this has nothing to do with any of the things that they say it does. If you tax big tech and transfer those funds to journalists, you will make journalists directly dependent on big tech. You create a direct link between the success of Facebook and the health of journalism in Canada. Do you think that might skew how they cover big tech? All journalists will become slaves of Facebook and Google. It will eviscerate their impartiality. Well, I think they're way ahead of you on that one, bro. But yeah, this is about incentive structures, guys, and that's what they keep doing, is they keep realigning all these different working incentive structures to really incentivize all the worst behavior and empower all the worst people among us. So Bill C-21, the largest gun ban in Canadian history. The bill was initially pitched as a way to freeze the sale of Canadian handguns, and the government pulled a bait and switch at the 11th hour, introducing an amendment to ban any, quote, firearm that is a rifle or shotgun that is capable of discharging centerfire ammunition in a semi-automatic manner that is designed to accept a detachable cartridge magazine and with a capacity greater than 5 cartridges of the type for which the firearm was originally designed. I believe the 5 cartridges per mag was already there. This effectively bans legal firearms ownership altogether. So Do we just have people who don't understand anything about firearms writing this? No, I think it's more than that. But the people who are writing this don't know anything about firearms. So here's a note. After publishing, I received this note. You might want to amend the section on firearms where it says, quote, this effectively bans legal firearms ownership altogether. Rifles and shotguns won't exist in Canada, close quote. This is not true since the amendment reference only impacts semi-autos, which are also center fire, not 22 rimfire. Generally speaking, it doesn't impact most bolt actions, pump actions, lever actions, or brake actions. There are a few shotguns or rifles which aren't semi-auto that are banned due to bore diameter or joules of muzzle energy, but not very many. Of course, the ultimate goal of the Liberals is to go after all guns, but this particular amendment doesn't do that. It just marches Canada one step closer to the end of firearms in this country. It does ban hundreds of pages of semi-auto centerfire firearms. The criticism about this amendment introduced at committee is 100% valid, but you are jumping to a conclusion which isn't valid. Okay, and then he continues on in the article here, but here's a couple of quotes. It says, this ban is sneaky and underhanded by moving the significant change to legislation at the committee amendment stage. The Liberals did not allow a democratic debate or experts to weigh in on the ban. That's Conservative MP Rob Morrison. Here's another one that says, quote, the majority of Canadians, 2.2 million licensed firearms owners will now be criminalized should these amendments to Bill C-21 become law, close quote. And that's the executive director of the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, CSSA. Continuing with the article, it says, the worst part about this gun grab will not reduce gun crime. Is that this will not reduce gun crime. Nearly all gun crime is done by gangs. Gang-related homicides in Canada are at an all-time high. And nearly all gang murders are committed with handguns, which are almost always smuggled across the border from the USA. Gun crime is done by criminals who don't care about gun laws. It's not done by farmers with legal shotguns. It is especially misguided to punish hunters and rural voters for urban handgun crime because Trudeau just eliminated several mandatory minimum sentences for smuggling handguns. The mandatory minimum for both gun smuggling and selling illegal guns was 3 years, but the PM thinks there should be none because, wait for it, Black people are the ones doing the smuggling. Yeah, I mean, that's the excuse. God, cringe. But whatever weakens the West is true here, guys. Let's bring in some more criminals. Let's stop imposing harsh penalties for violent crimes and disarm the population in the process. So it's just another one of those things that I think serves to weaken us as a society. And it's very much in line with a lot of what I've been saying about the supreme art of war and how it's subduing the enemy without fighting. That's something that Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, 500 BC. So how can any Canadian believe Trudeau is working to reduce gun crime while lowering sentences for handgun smugglers? Going after the law-abiding gun owners, legal gun sales bad, while going easy on the people committing the gun crimes, smuggling good, is as far from, quote, evidence-based policy, close quote, as you can possibly get. It's pure politics. People who own shotguns and rifles vote Conservative. People who own illegally smuggled handguns vote Liberal. So punish the former and pardon the latter. It's as simple as that. Everything Trudeau does is to maximize his chances of power. This is a pure power play by a communist despot to disarm the citizens who don't vote for him while rewarding the ones who did. Yeah, I can't find a lot to disagree with there. In effect, that is what's happening. It's just like I said, it only serves to weaken us as a society and make us more vulnerable and put us at greater risk. So Bill C-26, regulating cybersecurity, more sweeping authority for the government to control the internet. This bill allows the government to shut off the internet for anyone for any reason. The government can, quote, direct the telecommunications service provider to do anything or refrain from doing anything, close quote, and to, quote, suspend providing for a specific period any service to any specified person, close quote. Now might be a good time to order Starlink. There's Michael Geist. He's on a podcast there if you want to go check that out. It seems chill. I'm sure they won't use this to cut off the internet next time there is a Freedom Convoy. And here's a tweet from CTV News. It says Freedom Convoy 2.0 being planned for February 2023. yeah, I think that's misguided. And, you know, you can see that the mainstream is all over this, and they're probably going to stoke a whole bunch of stuff about how racist all these people are, and maybe go grab a bunch of, a bunch of different short video clips that some of the regimes plants out there and the movements post out there for, that are maybe vaguely racist or something like that, smear everybody as a terrorist, and then you got yourselves the false flag that they were looking for at the Freedom Convoy. So that's just me talking. I hope that people are being careful and staying safe out there. I'm always saying that, right? Stay frosty, stay safe. Look out for false flags, guys. So the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, along with the collective, including the International Civil Liberties Monitoring Group and the Privacy and Access Council of Canada and several other groups and academics, released their, quote, a joint letter of concern regarding Bill C-26. The joint letter outlines several areas of concern, including the following: increased surveillance. The bill allows the federal government to, quote, secretly order telecom providers, close quote, to, quote, do anything or refrain from doing anything necessary to secure the Canadian telecommunications system, including against the threat of interference, manipulation, or disruption, close quote. While this portion of the bill goes on to list several examples of what doing anything might entail, including, for example, prohibiting telecom providers from using specific products or services from certain vendors, or requesting service providers to develop a security plan, the collective expresses the concern that the power to order a telecom to, quote, do anything, close quote, quote, opens the door to imposing surveillance obligations on private companies and to other risks such as a weakened encryption standard. Yeah, all of this is very troubling. So termination of essential services, C-26, allows government to, quote, bar a person or a company from being able to receive specific services and bar any company from offering these services to others by a secret government order. Yay, more secret government orders. Which raises the risk of, quote, companies or individuals being cut off from the essential services without explanation, close quote. Yeah, just like everybody got their accounts frozen there at the convoy, right? So they cut off banking services without any kind of legal diligence or reasons. We don't like those people. And Christian Phelan got busted sending out a boycott list to the banks with respect to any trucker companies that supported the convoy. So that's what we're up against. It is fascism. Undermining privacy. The bill provides for collection of data of designated operators, which could potentially allow the government to, quote, obtain identifiable and de-identified persons' personal information and subsequently distribute it to domestic and perhaps foreign organizations. The lack of guardrails to constrain abuse. The bill would allow government to act without first being required to perform proportionality, privacy, or equity assessments to hedge against abuse, which is concerning to the collective given the severity of the penalties available under the statute. Secrecy impairing accountability, due process, and public regulation. Many of the collective's concerns stem from the fact that the government orders issued under the bill may be in secret without public reporting requirements, making it impossible for rights groups and the public to monitor, challenge how power is exercised under the bill. The secrecy attaching to such orders could impair the ability of operators subject to the orders to challenge them in court, because key evidence about secret orders, which would be required for a court challenge, could also be kept secret from the operators. So this is a lot of what we saw in the US with the FISA courts and the abuse down there under the Obama administration. Remember when Trump said that he just found out that Obama wiretapped his campaign? Yeah, that's Obamagate. You might want to look into that a little bit if you're kind of wondering where all this is headed. But basically, what Obama did there is he turned the security apparatus of the state against his own citizens. And I could get into multiple occasions, but on this one in particular, basically what they're doing is they're monitoring a CIA asset that they have named Carter Page, in order to grab information that's flying around from people around Trump. And they went after General Michael Flynn in particular because he was always against the Obama foreign policy in the Middle East in particular. They were moving on the Middle East under the Trump administration, especially with things like the relocation of the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And those were longly held tenets by the DC insiders. And this is something you can see John Kerry talking about all the time. Nope, none of that's ever going to work. But anyway, it had everything to do with keeping that deep state agenda going, okay? Especially in the Middle East. And what they did is they went after Trump's top security advisor and basically ruined his life. The process itself is the punishment with the court system. And they even went after his son at one point. And so he ended up under duress, I think, putting a guilty plea in there. But I digress. This is the kind of thing that they get up to with this, okay? Is they start going after political dissidents, anybody who opposes the regime's agenda. And you got yourself a Kafka trap, right? Franz Kafka wrote a book back in the day called The Trial, and it was another one of these takes on what was happening in the Soviet Union at the time. And anyway, yeah, it's a mind-bending kind of novel where you have no idea, what you're accused of, who your accusers are, what the process is, who the people in charge are, and so on and so forth. And so anyway, that's kind of the tyrannical hellhole that we're headed towards, where well, like I say, whatever serves the regime is true. Bill C-36, regulating hate speech. The Liberals have been trying to pass this bill for several years, and it temporarily died in 2021, but reintroducing it as a top priority for the Trudeau government. They have repeatedly promised to reintroduce the anti-hate bill, quote, as soon as possible. As per the Minister of Diversity and Inclusion, laugh my ass off at the fact that we even have a Minister of Diversity and Inclusion. Yeah, and there's Mad Marco there for, here, that's only a quick clip.
I just want to assure you that we're also engaging with law enforcement to ensure that the appropriate frameworks and protocols are in place. And I know that Minister Rodriguez is very eager to bring forward his legislation so that legislatively the tools are there as well. I've been very outspoken about this before online, that we need social media to step up. We need to see all of the big social media players keep up their end of the bargain when it comes to being transparent about how they're ensuring compliance with their own standards, so that living online can be as safe as in our communities. And that has to be a critical piece to this puzzle. So I assure you that Minister Rodriguez and others within our government are leaning in on this, and will bring forward the legislation as quickly as possible.
Yeah, so plenty of duck speak, as usual, from Mad Marco there. There's Blacklock saying federal censors will target hurtful words against politicians, as Guilbeault says. Also promises kill switch to shut down websites. Quote, news regulations for online platforms are needed, close quote. Yeah, Blacklock is always heavy hitting. Like I said, they got escorted out of the parliamentary press gallery there today or yesterday. So Bill C-36 means that Canadians can take a citizen to court if they feel like they might put something hateful online. You can and will be sued if you might post something hateful. The draft bill states, quote, a person may, with the Attorney General's consent, lay an information before a provincial court judge if the person fears on reasonable grounds that another person will commit an offense under Section 318, pushing for genocide, or subsection 319, inciting or promoting hate. Hey, when are we going to see somebody charge Trudeau with this? Section 318, pushing for genocide, or inciting and promoting hate. I'd be satisfied if we could get either one of those, although I think it should be both. All you have to do is think that someone might commit a hate crime, and the police will drag them to court. Yeah, there's Fry, and he says pre-crime. You hit me, pre-crime intervention. Okay. So hatred will be defined as the emotion that evokes detestation or vilification that is stronger than dislike or disdain, meaning that your tweets or blog posts will need to avoid causing any emotion stronger than, quote, dislike or disdain, close quote. Forget about tweeting anything that isn't woke ever again. Oh, and don't forget that since Bill C-16 passed last year, calling someone the wrong gender pronoun in Canada is considered, quote, hate speech, close quote. Good luck keeping track of everyone's pronoun du jour. That is true, Bill C-16. I think that was actually back in 2016 or 2017. And it brought the gender identity and gender expression under the Canadian Human Rights Act as prohibited grounds for discrimination. If you are unable to keep up with the latest pronoun trend, the person whose pronouns you forgot, heck, the person you don't even need to forget their pronouns, they just need to claim that they are afraid of you might forget their pronouns, can take a citizen to court and steal up to 20 grand from you, straight transfer from you to them. This will incentivize Canadians to spy on each other and will incentivize trolls to make a living out of provoking hate speech and then suing up being hate speeched, vexatious litigants galore. Yeah, no kidding. It's absolutely wide open to abuse. All you have to do is imagine the possibility of words. When you are dragged to court and ordered to pay 20 grand for even thinking about using the wrong pronouns, the bill also allows your accuser to remain anonymous. So that flies in the face of everything that basically common law has founded on. You have the right to know your accuser. Isn't that, which one is that? Is that habeas corpus, or is that just the right to know your accuser? Okay. This is especially effed up because the punishment should fit the crime, not the random wealth of the guilty person. Elon Musk, for example, will be able to come to Canada and misgender his son hundreds of times at will, but poor people won't be able to misgender once, lest their life be ruined with a fine. It's an interesting point. Bill C-36, British Columbia. So that's not federal. I think that's a pretty good amount of time spent on the old Carl stack here. So go check that out. Again, the author here, he put a lot of time into this, so I really appreciate it. Chris Burnett. It really paints this woeful picture right now because it's a legislative onslaught, like he says. So you've got the Online Streaming Act, that's going to be prioritizing good, wholesome Canadian content that the dear leader approves of. And then we've got the Online News Act. So that's going to destroy all of the news startups that we've seen come around since 2015. That's the objective there. I think that's when Rebel News really came online. And then there weren't they Rebel Media then. And we saw a lot of other folks, like there's True North now. These are the kind of folks that they're going after. And, what about just Rowan over at War Campaign or Clyde Do Something over there? They're going to take the whole goal of this thing is to crush the everyday citizen journalists that have been the only ones holding their feet to the fire since 2015 and since they started buying off the media. Okay, sweeping new powers for the CRTC under the Bill C-18 Online News Act. Like I said, this doesn't have anything to do with what the CRTC was originally created for. It's basically a spectrum manager for the kinds of broadcasters and tech companies, but there's really nothing to mediate here when you're talking about cyberspace. Like it's essentially unlimited, right? And ISPs can manage all that. They're already doing it. Bill C-21 is the largest gun ban in Canadian history. So, we're not going to be able to say speech that they hate. We're not going to be able to have our own citizen journalists. We're not going to be armed. That's always one of the things that really kind of scares me, and I showed you why. And the largest gun ban in history. And regulated into cyberspace. They're going to be cutting people off from the internet altogether if they so much as deem them a threat. We have ourselves a Kafka trap on the way, I think, once we've got it all said and done. And, if you're wondering what I'm thinking about there, just check out the book, The Trial. It's a pretty twisted kind of mind bender, akin to 1984 or something like that. So that's just it. You can't know what's in the law until you've broken it. That's basically how a Kafka trap works. And I'm all the way back to Nick Nanos now. So that's about the last headline for today there, guys. Thanks for staying with me. It's been about an hour and a half here. I think I'll throw to a couple of comments if you guys have any questions. Let's see. I got a time for a vote of non-confidence. I don't think that we even have confidence in the opposition to do that at this point. I don't see the Conservatives getting a majority if they actually do push for this campaign or go into the election in the spring, which seems to be the rumblings. But I think that's really more about feeling things out. Nobody wants to go, but I saw something that said Trudeau's telling everybody to get their money ready for a spring campaign. And of course, that is this constant election cycle is to keep the grassroots out, right? Let's see. Here's Ken. Ken's always a pretty good, got some good comments. CIBC has already started with the carbon footprint on their customers. When you ask for a receipt at the bank, the machine asks you if you would like an email instead, but you continue with yes, print receipt. The manager told me that it gets collected into a database and it gets people's names for the digital currency coming. Well, I guess I wouldn't put anything past them at this point. I don't know if it's all the way down to that, but I'd be very interested to hear more about that if there's something I can dig into on that. Okay, guys. Again, thanks for staying with me. One more time, this is Jeff Evely, Ops Sergeant Major with Veterans for Freedom, saying stay frosty and stay safe out there.